Okay, good morning all. Thank you for joining. As I mentioned, from today we are starting the architected data platform in Azure. This is again part of the Azure AZ303 exam. So let me. So you're already familiar. We are MK Azure User Group, and this is the initiative from MK Azure User Group. And you also know who I am. I'll skip it. So again, this exam AZ303 is the one we are focusing on. So you can see here the variety of building blocks for each of the building blocks representing a specific domain. For example, last week we completed network infrastructure, and then the 3 weeks before we completed storage infrastructure, and then computer infrastructure is the one we started in the beginning. And infrastructure operation, we have covered the infrastructure as a code and ARM template, Visual Studio, how you can deploy PowerShell, etc. But this is partially we completed. Few more items to cover. Once completed, then I can close that. So today's focus is architected data platform. So assuming like most of us are familiar with the basics data elements, and based on that, I'm going to continue. In case anybody needed a clarification, I can walk you through that next week. And so another thing before we move into the next one. So next week, 11 o'clock, we will not be joining in this meeting invite. So next week, I'm going to present Azure. There is a session happening in globally. It's called Global Azure. So I used to participate every year. We used to run that in a full day workshop in Jurisin before. Now, because of the pandemic, we are running that as a online session. So I don't know how many of you familiar. Let me show that. So Global Azure is a community initiative. Like we are one of the community, Milton Keynes Azure User Group. Similar way, globally, there are 426 speakers, 422 sessions are in 6 continents they are running. So I'm also speaking about, presenting about the Azure application gateway to secure the Azure app gateway. So if we go to the live stream, this is the previous one. I think no. So speaker sessions will be worldwide sessions. So here our community Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes. Yeah, Milton Keynes is selected already. So I'm presenting and I'm going to talk about the securing web app with AMP Gateway. This one of the component we explored as part of the network infrastructure, but I'm going to walk you through the steps, how you configure, what is the benefit, etc., and how you can secure your web application. So this will be presented on 17th April. So 12. I just need to verify this. I can post in the group message because this one was planned for 11 o'clock. I'm not sure why this is still showing 12 o'clock. In case if this is only for 12 o'clock scheduled, then our session will be moved to only for next week. We are going to join in this one. Okay. So instead of joining our Zoom link, we will be joining a link here. I will share this link via the chat group, the WhatsApp group and the LinkedIn group we have. So please be prepared. Next week, please do not join the Zoom invite. Week after, you can continue as normal. Only for next week, you join with this live stream. So this will be like a YouTube live stream where you can join and listen what we are presenting. Hope everyone got the update, right?
Yeah, we got the update. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so going back to the data platform. So data platform, as we all know, this contains a variety of topics. So the modules we are going to cover in this series, like it's not going to complete in one session. It's going to be continuously For about another 2-3 weeks, we'll be talking about data. And today we are going to explore the few items from here. So first, we need to understand what are the data available. And I think when we discussed storage session, during the storage session, we talk about the type of data, right? So similar thing is applicable here. In this diagram, you can see in the modern data platform, you have a variety of data. So pretty much most of us started in the beginning 15 year, 10 year before the relational database is the commonly famous because most of our applications needed a structured and schema. So probably like employee database or transaction, everything is we normally use relational database. It's a structured schema. So it will have a table, views, store procedure, etc. Right? So this is one type of data, and another type of data we explored previously, which is semi-structured. It could be your CSV file when you're exporting, or a logs or JSON file or XML file. This is loosely typed, and majority this is a volume. So the volume will be bigger than the relational database, and that is why in the data side there is three B's are mentioned here: volume, variety, and velocity. And the next one is in non-structured. It's a different type of variety. Images, video files, audio files, free text. These are also different type of data. And then you have a velocity. Velocity is representing your the amount of data going to be generated in given time. It's going to be huge. For example, your smartwatch or your car, smart devices, or any IoT devices, sensors is going to generate massive amount of data that need storage and processing, etc. So even though we are going to talk about the data platform, we are also going to talk about not only the databases type, we are also going to talk about the data analytical tools and how those tools will be visualized. For example, here, first, whatever the data is generated, we need some mechanism to inject that, right? We need to bring the data into our platform to manage and provide the meaningful information to the applications. So in this example, you can see like you have a multi-variety data here, which we talk about the structure and semi-structure, non-structure, and stream data. So all these data, we need to bring it to the system. So when it comes to load and inject, you have two different Azure components. One is Azure Data Factory. This will be mainly used for bringing your data injection purpose. You can use this to bring the data into your data lake. Data lake is pretty much a storage container where you can store your data. Um, the stream data, because it is coming like a millisecond, you will have millions of requests. You need a high processing event hub. Previously, you also have an event grid. Now the event hub is the one fulfilling the need of managing these kind of velocity data. So event hub is another component in Azure which will be used for all these resources. When they generate the data, they will send it to event hub. Event hub will receive and put it in the stream analytics. So when it put it into stream analytics in the live time, you can simply use your Power BI data visualization tools to run a query against these stream analytics. So basically, it is a live path, hard path. In case you don't want the live data, then you wanted to put it in some storage, then you can also use Azure Data Lakes for storing your data. So you have a two-way communication, right? So hard path and cold path. So hard path, what is the scenario why we need this when you already have this? For example, I have toll number of cars are coming and going, and I have a toll camera sensor which is sending me data. So those data comes to Event Hub, and the Event Hub actually presenting to Stream Analytics. From this dashboard, I can query and generate a report in a live data. How many cars are crossing this minute? Because we need a live data. The same thing applicable for banking industry for the transaction which they want to understand what is happening, etc. And again, like financial industry, any fintech like even the stock markets, those items you need the stream analytics and the dashboard. Then you have, you can see also Azure Synapse. This is another storage. It's actually fully managed data warehousing solution. This is also underlying uses the Azure Data Lake storage, as well as this can work with a variety of SQL databases or Databricks for analytical purpose. You can perform your ETL using a Databricks. It's kind of like giving a cluster servers. So in a given a time you want to run a millions of queries, you need a high processing computer in a cluster. So when you create Databricks here or HDInsight, that will give you clustered resources. So once you've done that processing, the cluster can be removed. So that is one of the beauty of this cloud here. So Databricks can be used for those ETL process for analyzing your data. Once you analyze the data, you can either send it to cognitive services as a ML service, or you can also put it into your SQL database or your Cosmos DB. Whatever the data type you have generated, you can put it into a variety of database. So database, you have variety database, which will cover in the next slide. So in this example, we have a Cosmos DB. Then the finalized data, summary data, anyone can access from any application. And all the analytical data, you can use analytics as an end user. You can perform your analytics on the Power BI. Power BI, most of you are familiar. This is one of the leading data visualization tool. Another competitive product is Tableau. These two are the popular in the industry currently. Okay, so now we are going to discuss the detailed informations. What are the type of databases we have, and this gives you the information. Each and every services has unique need. For example, if you have a need of using a relational database and you want it to be a fully managed by Microsoft like a PaaS services, you can use Azure SQL Database, and that gives you single database, and it is a PaaS services and also a relational database, and all the availability, storage, like hyperscale storage, everything is managed by Microsoft. Up to 100 terabyte you can store in a single database. So there is no limit on this. There is a limit, but 100 terabyte is huge for relational database. But normally in any organization, I don't think you need a 100 terabyte other than the complex industries. And the next one, you have a Azure SQL managed instance. So this is similar to Azure SQL Database. Again, it's a PaaS services. It gives all the PaaS benefits, but the main advantage with this is giving you a predefined resources, which is going to be only dedicated for you. In the previous one, it's a shared resources. So underlying infrastructure is a shared, but technically they have the security applied, like, but the resources are shared. But whereas here you can say you want a dedicated resources to manage your SQL database, then you can go to the managed instance. Then you have a next variety is SQL Server on a virtual machine. So we have noticed before, we can also create a SQL databases for like when you wanted a SQL database, you can create a sorry about that. So you can also create virtual machine and then deploy your SQL Server. So that is another option available. And the next area, sorry, I got skipped. I'm not familiar with this tool setup, so that's why it's got some messages turned around. Okay. No idea what is happening.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. You can carry on. No worries.
Can you see these red lines or in your?
We can see the red lines, but that
Okay.
shouldn't be a problem. No worries.
Okay, no problem. So, so the next thing we talk about like is a SQL Server pass and SQL Server Managed Instant pass, and another one SQL Server on a virtual machine. So when you deploy it in the virtual machine SQL Server, you have the operating system level control, but the underlying only the hardwares are managed by Microsoft, but the software OS you have your own control. You can deploy n number of databases depending on your virtual machine size. Then you also have a variety of other open source database like a PostgreSQL, MySQL. So these are the MariaDB. This type of database, if you're working on a marketing tools or developing an app or gaming systems, you can also use PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB. And this Azure Cosmos DB is one of the key component because it's a globally distributed databases. You can also use for variety of scale, and again all the cloud benefit like a high availability, low latency, everything is guaranteed. And you also you can also use it for Cassandra and MongoDB, and this is one of the key area we'll be exploring further. And you can also have a in-memory database, for example like a cache for Redis. So this is mainly used for in-memory data store. And then you have the database migration service. This is mainly used for migrating your on-premises data to cloud. It is acting as a migration engine from your source to target. You can use it. Also, you can use this tool for analyzing your on-premises database before you're migrating to the cloud. So that is another advantage with the database migration service. And today we are covering one by one what are the services part of the data analytics, and we are going to explore each and every item one by one. So that's why we are reviewing more services in today's session. Then you have a managed instance for Apache Cassandra. This is also modernizing existing data cluster and apps. You can also use it for um, again, this is similar to the SQL managed instance. It's a managed instance. You have your own dedicated resources, and you can deploy your Apache Cassandra here. So we also need to understand the difference between some of the databases, right? You have a managed instance, you have Azure SQL DB and Elastic Pools. So you can see here the type of scheduled activities, and mainly this area is featured scope is you need to understand. When it comes to Azure SQL DB, you can only deploy one databases, but you don't have an instance. Whereas in the managed instance, you have your own instance and you can deploy a number of database, but there is a limit of having 100 database in per instance. But in the Azure SQL DB, it's only for a single database you can create it. And this gives you some comparison. And also the networking side, managed instance, as we are creating a dedicated resource, you can bring this into within the virtual network. Virtual network is your own network, and you can bring your managed instance inside the virtual network. Whereas in the Azure database, Azure SQL DB, technically it is not inside your virtual network, but you can use service endpoint for allowing the communication only from this virtual network or more than one virtual network to your Azure SQL DB, rather than opening up for everyone. So this we explored in the last week network session. So I think by this we can probably move into demo today, and that gives you some of the basic understanding how we are going to use our tool. So for now, I'm just going to pause a session for a minute, and then I'll restart it. Okay, thank you. So another 20 minutes we have before the session close. We will just quickly go through the SQL database, how we are going to create it. So I think probably I can also walk you through some of the products. So when you go to the products in Azure portal, you can go to the database section. So whatever the services we referred here, everything is mentioned here. You have a SQL database and Cosmos DB, Postgre, and I think we will explore all of this one by one. So today's focus is pretty much like either a SQL database or a managed instance or a SQL server on the VM. Pretty much covers same area, but the setting is different for underlying infrastructure. So today I'm just going to create one SQL database. So I'm going to say create a new. So RG underscore SQL 02. Okay. So here you can see some of the settings you already familiar whenever we create other services. Those gives you some of the information here. So and database name, we can provide a unique database name here. So we created the resource group, and now we are going to create MySQL server. So we created a SQL server, its unique name, and then we can give a DB name, probably like server. Okay, so this is the database name, right? So I will say MySQL DB, and here I will say the server name is because we need a new one. I'll say new server name MySQL server. Okay, it's not available, so I'll just say MK02. Okay, MySQL 02 is our server name, and MySQL DB is our database name. Then I need to provide the SQL Server logins. So I'm just going to give a SQL user as a SQL Server name, and I have one standard password which I'm going to use it here. Same re-entered, and we can select the location wherever we wanted. As we are in the UK, I'm going to say UK South. Okay, 02 already exists. Probably I can say 002. Okay, 002 is available. I can select, click OK. So now we created the new SQL server, which comes with the database called MySQL DB. And this SQL server is a logical server. It is not a physical server, like in the managed instance or on-premises or virtual machines. You have your own server, but this is only logical because it's a PaaS service. So and you can also select elastic pool, but in this demo we are not selecting elastic pool. Elastic pools is provides you the shared resources for budget for low costing purpose, but we are not going to use elastic pool because we need only one database. For example, if you wanted a more than one database in elastic pool, you can select yes, but we are going to select only no here. And then you can also select general purpose, what type of database you need. The default one shows 2 vCore and 32 GB RAM, but we don't need a 32 GB RAM, so I'm going to lower this. So probably like you can say 12 GB. And every time you change the resources, it shows you the price per month. So this is also useful. And here you can see, as we know, it's not like automatically all the PaaS services will give you highly available in across the region or anything. You will have to specifically mention because each configuration has a set of cost involved. So here you can see like would you like to make this database zone redundant. So you already know zone redundant means in the same region, more than one data center, the data will be spread. That is the zone redundant. But in this case, we don't need a zone redundant. We can just go with a single. In case you want to explore, you want a database, but the database copy is replicated to other data center in the same UK South, you can select yes. For now, I'll say no. Click OK. So now we have created. So next we are going to the networking part. And most of the time in the company implementation real time, you will not select, you will normally select no access or a private endpoint. You never enable public endpoint because you don't want to expose this into internet. But because we are going to do a demo now, I'm going to select a public endpoint, and then I'm going to the security part. Here, Azure Defender. This is one of the component recently introduced, which can sit top of your Azure SQL Server to provide you the security services for any vulnerability or detecting any anomalous activities, this defender can be useful. You can enable this, but for now, we are not enabling the defender. But in the real time, when you are deploying for someone, you can also explore. If you wanted a more security on top of your SQL server, you can enable defender. So now I'm saying not now. So then I go to review and create. All the settings are what I have selected and creating. So once this is created, we need to enable. So the database is created and it is public endpoint available. We can connect it, but we need to enable this to communicate to our services. So I have another 10 minutes for this session. I think today we don't need extra session. I think within the 10 minutes I can complete. So once the database is created, I can show you how we are going to connect it. So meantime, so what we are going next steps we are going to do once the database is created, we are going to enable the firewall settings to allow from my personal machine, I can connect to my SQL database. So I need to enable my IP address. I have to give it to SQL server and say, hey, accept any request coming from this particular IP. That settings I need to enable. In the same way, the reason why I wanted to connect from my laptop is if you wanted to use some sort of like communication from your SQL Management Studio. So if you want to connect from your database to the cloud, you can enable that. And let me open this. So Management Studio, I hope most of you familiar. Management Studio is the one, it's the end client designer tool where from here you can connect to your servers in the cloud. So I'm going to shift here. This is the Management Studio. I will come to this later. For now, our database is created. I go to Home, I go to Resource Group, and I have a new resource group called Demo02, where I can see my SQL server and database. So when before I go to the database, first I need to enable the server level firewall rules to allow because we are going to connect from Azure portal itself. We need to allow Azure services resource to access this resource, and then I also need to allow this client IP, which is I think this is my IP. Let me check. Yeah, so this is the client IP. I wanted to allow client IP. So I can give this. So I'm allowing this to communicate. I think this is already there. I just give some space. Yeah. So I allowed Azure services to talk to my SQL server the same way I'm allowing my local public IP to communicate to this. So I'm going to save this because I enable this. Now I can communicate from my machine and the portal as well as my local machine. Now I go to the overview of the SQL server and the database. So now we are in the database. Here you can see no elastic pool created. In case you selected elastic pool, this will show you the elastic pool related information. Now we are going to use a query editor. So query editor is similar to your Management Studio where you can just say enter your credential and then log in. So today we have selected this is the login user, password I entered. When I click OK, it is opening a query window where I can see the list of tables available, etc. As I have created a blank SQL server, I don't have any tables here. Whereas in another one, I have, while creating the SQL database, I created the sample data as well. So in this one, we have the same setup, but I'm going to the overview database. So here, when I go to query window, I provide the password, click OK. So now here you can see the lots of sample tables are available. In case I wanted to run a query for any project need, I can simply run some queries here. So the way you normally do it in the SQL. I have some sample query here. This is going to bring data from various tables and run a query here. So that it returns the results. The same way, this is one way, like if you don't have any management studio in your local data machine, you can simply use query editor for running any query or performing insert or anything. And so the connection string in the left hand side, what you are seeing here, this connection string will be used when you are actually using any ADO.NET driver connection. You can use this. You can see here variety of connection strings. So depending on your application type, you can use one of the connection string. The another one today, I quickly want to go through this connecting from your local. So I go to database engine, and this is my server name. How I can find out the server name like this? When you go to your SQL server here, it gives you server name like a public endpoint server name. MySQL server 01.database.windows.net. This is your server name. You can just copy and put it here, and then you have a SQL server username, and I'm going to enter my password as well. So the password is, so once I entered my password here, I will be able to connect to the SQL server. Same way how we connect in the on-premises. This gives you full control where I can see the same databases here. So in case I want to run a query, I can just go to this query window, new query here, and this gives you full freedom. Like in the browser, sometimes you find it difficult depend on your internet speed. Okay, so maybe I need to run differently. So if I wanted to run query about this table, I can simply go to the top 1000 rows, and that gives me complete data, whatever the data available in this table. So I can perform in any database administrator activity from here. So hope these two, like we created a SQL database, SQL server as a logical. This is the past services. Azure SQL Server, we create a database, and we also try to connect from the query window from the Azure portal browser, as well as from the client machine. If you have a management studio, using the management studio, you can connect to your SQL database. So next week, we can go through the how we can create some sample web application and how we can communicate from web application to SQL Server, or injecting what are the different way to inject the data that we can discuss in the next week session. Hope this helps for the overview today.
Karthik, I got one question,
Yes,
if you
please.
don't mind.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned we need to add IP address, then only we can connect from SQL SSMS to
Yeah.
cloud server. The IP address, where we need to add it?
Okay. So basically, the cloud resources you created, it is not available for anyone, right? The best practices, you always need to keep your firewall rules. For example, you go to your resource group where you can see your SQL server name and SQL server as a SQL database. So on the server level, you have a control to configure your firewall rules. So when you click a SQL server, in the left hand side, under the security section, you have a firewall and virtual network. When you click this, you can configure your IPs. So if you want to know what is your IP, you can simply Google it like what is my IP. That will give you your IP address. You take that IP address and put it here. So this way, from my machine, I'm allowing my SQL server, so I can connect from my local machine. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Even
Okay.
same thing for
Sorry.
management instance as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
session is going to end now. So in case anybody wanted to join, then we can rejoin. What do you think? Okay. So please, next week we don't discuss SQL. We are going to talk about the global Azure session. So please join. I will post it in the WhatsApp group. Please join the YouTube channel for live session for next week, and week after normally we can continue here.
Yeah. Okay, Kathy. And all the best to you as well.
Thank you all.
Thanks.